Hello, it's Sean, and welcome to Hero of the Table. Today I'm going to be working on a new project. I'm going to be working on making some ruins for Frostgrave. I've started playing that with a friend of mine and need a little bit more terrain, so I'm going to try my hand at making some different buildings and ruins with some foam. So what I've got some bases cut. This is just a MDF board. I've beveled the edges, sanded it down a little bit so that it will blend with the table fairly well. Cut some foam core, and this is going to be the structure that I use to put the blocks around the bricks of the walls. So I'm going to hot glue these down to the board. I wanted this to look like it was a window, so what I've done is I've measured up a 1/2 inch from the bottom. When I put some brick in there, it's going to be a little bit taller. I know this isn't a fantasy model, but you can kind of see they look out this window. You can kind of get an idea of the height that it's going to be, and of course the fantasy models will be a little bit different, but generally I think it's a pretty decent height for the bottom of the window. I've made them about 1 inch wide, and again I'm going to frame them with some bricks as well, so that window will be a little bit higher and a little bit narrower. You can obviously do whatever size windows you want, whatever you think looks appropriate. I've got a couple that I've done. This is going to be a longer wall section, so I put 2 windows in there, and this is a shorter one. I cut these pieces a little bit shorter than the bases, so that gives me some room to add rubble to the ends. So kind of as the wall tapers down, my plan is to stick it here, and I'll brick this up so that it looks nice, but then the wall will kind of taper down on the ends. I've also cut a whole bunch of blocks. These are about a 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch. These are going to be used to make the walls. I'm going to glue them on, and that'll give a nice texture to the wall. I've not done a whole lot of individual bricks. This is actually just my second and third piece that's doing this. I've only done one before, and it really looks great. I've done other stuff with either really big blocks that they look nice, but they're big, so they're not as varied, or I've just kind of done stuff that I didn't cut individual bricks. So I really like the way that looked. I have a Proxxon cutter, so I cut a whole bunch of these down with the Proxxon. I put them in a bucket with some rocks, shook it up to give them a little bit of texture. You can cut these by hand with a knife. Probably would take a lot of time, but you could do it if you don't have the Proxxon. Or you can just use a flat piece of foam, draw on the brick, and do the texture that way. There's a variety of ways that you can do the brick texture, but I've got these and the Proxxon cutter, so that's what I'm going to try and see how it turns out. So, like I said, I'm going to hot glue these down, put them on here, and then we'll start building the texture around the edges. The good thing about these, they're basically the same width as the foam core that I've got, so when I do it, I'm going to have 3 courses of brick. There'll be obviously one on each side, and then a middle, and then the other side. So when I put them on the ends, they're the same width as the foam core, so I can have that end carry over without having any problems of cutting weird shapes or anything. So I think my hot gun should be warm. We're going to just put a little hot glue on the bottom of these and stick them in place. So you can see, I think you can see it, a little bit of hot glue comes out the edges where I push it down. I'm going to take an X-Acto knife and trim that just so my blocks will line up nice, but this is pretty solidly attached now, just no time at all. That glue dries, and it gives me a good basis for the structure that I'm going to build. Alright, so I'm going to start applying the bricks. I've got this tacky glue. I like it because it is a little bit thicker than just Elmer's, but it still holds pretty well. So I'm going to use this to put these on, and it's pretty straightforward. Just start putting a bead of glue down and attaching these. So I kind of like to work in little bits of batches, kind of let this dry before you go on, so that way you're not constantly jostling them, having to reset them in place. The other thing is, you can see I've got some the glue that's kind of seeping through the edges there. I don't necessarily want that. You can be a little bit more careful when you're applying the glue, so you don't have that creep, but I think it's just as easy to take some water and a crappy brush and kind of clean it up a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do now, is just kind of clean that a little bit. Alright, you see I've kind of just wiped the glue onto the base. I'm going to texture that later, so it's not a big deal. It's a good place to get that glue out of the way. So you can see, just clean it up a little bit, then I won't have those glue lines, the bulges from the glue, when I paint this later. So the glue stays wet for a little bit, and you can just kind of adjust how these are set until you like where they're at. And then, like I said, I like to leave it a little bit, let that glue set a little bit, and then I can start working on some more and kind of keep going from there. So these windows have the blocks hanging over them. I did that so that when I trim it down, I can cut it flush with the foam core, and then I'll use a different shape of block to kind of cover and frame around the window. But it's pretty easy to trim these down. Once your glue is dry, just take your nice sharp blade and start trimming these in line with the foam core. Cut off those blocks. You could save them because you use some half blocks in some other areas. Now you've got it cut out, and you can I'll show you the blocks that I'm going to put in there to frame the window. I want to add some blocks to the base, just as like they've fallen off of this wall, just to add a little bit of texture to the base. So I've cut some in halves, cut some with kind of little angles, and the cutoffs that I have from here I'm going to use, and plus some full bricks, and I'll just kind of glue them down on the base to make it look like some have fallen off the wall and are just sinking into the mud. I cut some bigger blocks that are going to be used in the window frames. These are about 3/4 by about 1/2 inch. I kind of cut them so that they would fit into these. I wanted them to overhang a little bit, and I wanted to be able to fit two in the bottom. So depending on how big you made your windows, you can cut these to the appropriate size for that. So they're going to get glued in here, and then I'm going to use them to go up the sides as well. And that'll frame in the windows with stone as well. I painted the bases on these brown. I just use a nutmeg brown. Any brown that you have is going to be good. I do it to keep the light brown from the actual base from showing through. I'll texture it later, but I like to put that brown coat on it just to give it a nice solid base coat. Next, I'm going to paint all these bricks with Mod Podge. I've just got some here on my little palette. I'm going to just put a coat across all of the foam. Gives it a more sturdy texture, and keeps it from being damaged as much. Alright, once the Mod Podge dries, I'm going to go over all of the brick with just a black craft paint. I'm going to use this territorial beige, and I'm going to paint a couple of blocks a little bit different color. I'm going to do this brown instead of having them just as the base of black. When I dry brush over the model, hopefully that'll blend them in a little bit, but you know, usually when you see a bunch of bricks, they're not all the exact same color. They've kind of weathered together, but there'll be some variation in color, so I'm going to try that and see how it looks. Next, I'm going to dry brush all of the brick with pewter gray. So after the dry brush, these browns are not blending as well as I'd like, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash over those with a dark tone and see if that does a little bit better job of blending them. These blocks are blending in a little bit better now. Next, I'm going to dry brush this with a brighter gray. It's going to be granite gray. Alright, I'm going to clean up the base. I painted it brown earlier. I'm just going to repaint it that. It's burnt umber is the color I'm using. And that just gives the base a nice solid brown, so that when I add the basic material, if something pops off, then it's not a weird color showing through. It's just that nice brown. Next, I'm going to work on texturing the base. I've got some tile grout and soil mix. It's about 50% soil and 50% tile grout. It's just kind of a brown color. I'm going to spread some watered down wood glue around the base, sprinkle on that mix all over the base, and then I'll spray it with some watered down PVA to get the tile grout to set, and it sets pretty hard, and it's a nice finish for the base. Next up, I'm going to paint the base. I've got some burnt umber. I'm just going to paint that all over the grout tile mix that I did. This isn't strictly necessary, you know, that tile grout gives a nice brown color. I want it to tie in with other terrain that I've already done, that I painted the bases with that burnt umber, so that's why I'm doing it. But if you wanted to leave it as is, it would look just fine. Next up, I'm going to dry brush the base with tan. I've got some static grass clumps here. I'm going to apply a couple of those around each base just to give a little bit of greenery. Next up, I'm going to apply a little bit of flock. Got some watered down wood glue, an old brush. I'm going to spread around a little bit and sprinkle on this flock and add another little bit of vegetation to the piece. I finished working on these ruined wall sections. I'm pretty pleased with how they turned out. The blocks that I did to get kind of a different coloration in here are very subtle after what I did with them. You can see one here, and then here and here. They're almost not noticeable at all, so I think I need to change how I do that a little bit. I'm not sure what I'll do next time, but overall I'm still very happy with this project. I want to make more of these. I didn't do a ton of greenery on the bases. I might change that. I'm planning to use these for Frostgrave, and I haven't decided if I want to actually put snow on the bases. I did do some grass, because even in, if the story of Frostgrave, the town's thawing out, so I figured some things would start to grow right away with that thawing. So I can always add snow even with the greenery there, but if I add the snow, and it pretty much limits what I can do. I thought about making some tokens just kind of on some bases and putting snow on that to kind of lay around, but that seems kind of weird too. So we'll see. I haven't decided. This is Lord of the Rings model. It's Gandalf the White. You can see kind of the scale with him, how they look. I think they turned out very well. Pretty happy with them, as I said. I'm gonna build a variety of these. I did stonework around the windows on these. I've got another one that I did some woodwork. I'm probably gonna do some corners, a couple of them that are multiple levels, and some different stuff, just so I can kind of show the ruin of the city. I may do some complete buildings eventually, but I'm not sure about that. But I really like the way these individual blocks look. They look nice when they're done. Of course, there'd be much more rubble around these, showing that this thing had collapsed. I've only got a couple of blocks, but sometimes that amount of rubble kind of gets in the way of what you're doing, or you need to have such a big base to really cover that what you need. So I think you get the idea with the little blocks around on the bases, but to each their own. I hope you liked this video. I hope you found it useful, and it's a pretty simple project. I kind of stole some of my ideas from Blackmagic Craft and the Tabletop Engineer. I've seen some stuff from both of them where they did similar stuff, but you get inspiration from different creators, and you kind of go with it and do your own thing. So I'm pretty happy with what I've got. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, the other projects that I work on, you can subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bell so you get notifications when I post new videos. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook, and there I post about games I'm playing and projects that I'm working on that may not make it to video. You can find links to those in the description below. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. And remember, you don't have to be an expert to paint your models. Even a basic paint job will make for a better game. Thanks for watching.